Okay, so procedurally, I'd like to suggest that we first make a decision whether or not we want to move forward with one consultant, or is there a desire for us to have two consultants? I think that's the first question we should try to tackle and see if we can come to some consensus with. You like that? Tom, Mr. Tom?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I want to commend the staff because the four firms you brought were all excellent and really impressive. So it was terrific. I can't actually conceive of not having PCA as part of the mix, just given the long history and their contributions over the years, and an abrupt transition away to one other firm, I think would be difficult. On the other hand, I do think, and I think today really underscored, that there's an awful lot of value to adding another voice to the mix. And so I'd strongly advocate that we have two firms. And I guess, and just going one step further, Alan's firm has sort of picked which side of the equation they want, and I would defer to them on that. And that would, I guess that sort of frames the decision.
Okay, so yeah, Chris, go ahead.
Just real quick to let you know, I had once described this to the staff as we kind of had an a la carte menu or an entree to mess the whole thing up. One of the solutions, I want to credit Robin and Jack for thinking of this solution for you. Alan brought up the question about not liking the split about what it is. You can also kind of, I guess, have jambalayas. You could hire two firms. The response would be you're hiring them for both scopes, then we'll negotiate exactly what they do and then figure out what they want to charge for it. So you can kind of do you can do two firms, A and B, you can do one firm, or you can do two firms and mix it all up and figure it out.
Okay, so Tom, was that a motion for us to?
Well, I'll make a motion that we hire two firms.
Okay, is there a second on that for discussion purposes?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Lawson, that we hire two firms. So discussion? Michael?
First of all, I want to basically second what Tom said about commending the staff. Outstanding from both the perspective of the quality and in an industry that is amazingly non-diverse, to find four excellent firms with the diversity that they demonstrated, I think is outstanding, and I commend you for that. Otherwise, I'd repeat everything that Tom said.
Dana?
So I've been around CalSTRS for quite a while. Not quite as long as Alan has, but quite a while. Not necessarily as a board member, but as a liaison for CTA for quite some time. I can't imagine us without Alan either. Chris, you know, I think what Alan said about the two sides, A and B, that there's definitely things in B that you have to do with A. So I think the jambalaya, for me, makes a lot more sense. I think that there's a lot of, after the conversations that we've had, I think there's a lot of benefit to having another voice in the room. I'll leave it at that for right now.
Paul?
I like the jambalaya idea of hiring two firms to both do A and B and then figure it out. You know, I think doing without Alan doesn't make any sense, and I think today's presentation convinced me even more so. That said, I think the other firms demonstrated, I think, some value in having some different perspectives, so I'm with Tom on that one.
Could I make another motion?
you want to
Go to jambalaya.
Hold on a second, Tom, hold on.
I'm
Let me
getting
get
really hungry right now for some reason. I don't know what it is.
you all right
You
with
can
that,
flip me
Sharon?
out. That's okay. Yeah, totally.
Click out.
Mixed
Click
grill.
out the hair. Go ahead.
Tom? Go ahead, Tom.
Oh, yeah, I just want to make another motion that we go to the combined A and B for two firms.
So just general consultant pot,
Yeah.
2 people do that.
To be shared in
You
the staff.
parcel out the work as you think is
Yeah.
the right skill, I think is the idea.
Right.
You know, the obvious is more of a pool approach, and you're gonna say, we think the best talent for this issue is this. So I think it requires a stronger hand by the committee and the chair to determine how you want to call on
But I think the
service.
caveat is we want to hear from both consistently.
Right, so since Tom was the maker of the motion and he's amending the motion, does that have to be seconded by?
It has to be, if the original second, if it's okay with the original second, then it's a substitute motion.
Okay,
Now,
so
it's a
we're,
substitute motion, so you need a second for that.
so we're now building consensus around 2 consultants and the staff recommendation of jambalaya approach, right? Don't put that in the minutes, folks. Jambalaya approach, we'll get it
Yeah, I was
right.
going to say, we need to have a
We'll
more
come up with
professional
something.
way of coming up.
Terry?
Yes, I don't disagree necessarily with the motion. I would just like to sort of get a little bit more expansion and clarification, because there were really, in the 2 schedules, each of them had sort of 2 major assignments. Are we talking that staff would, in some situations, sort of have a backup for certain of the services or not? Or would there only be one assigned to each one of those elements? Or we'll just wait to hear what is recommended by staff in the future and then ultimately approve that if that's what we want? I mean,
Right, that's the,
this is the board's consultant. I think we need to understand exactly what we're going to be getting with this approach.
Chris, go ahead, yeah.
Yeah, my view would be, I don't want to be any part of that. It's your consultant, you hit it on the head, it's not ours. So, and I think because Jack and I were just talking, you know, the retainer fee for these firms is pretty big. It would be, I think, wise to, you don't have to do it tonight, but to basically divvy up the services. You could certainly, they're always going to both be in the room. I'm going to make the consultants always sit over there so they can come right to the front when you want them. And you could probably certainly, they would allow you to call on them and ask for a second opinion, I think, but we'd be clear of that list of services, kind of identify who's got what, figure out what they want to charge for that. I would assume, since their fees were all generally close, it's going to be some portion of the pie, and the total fee would be around what we're seeing. But that way you're not paying 2 full retainers, unless you want to.
well, yeah, that's going to be mine. So
So Sharon?
that was going to be sort of my concern / consideration is obviously just the cost, right? I mean, I agree with all the comments. I think having a different voice, you know, is a good idea. I guess I'm also wondering about, I don't know if we can do this, but if there's a way, since PCA and Alan have been such the patriarch, or if you will, of the, you know, is there a way to kind of have Harry or to work with him with a new consultant to kind of craft something that would sort of play to their strengths, but then, do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
I'm not-
I'm just looking at the procurement people to make sure that's okay. One of the things I heard Alan say that I thought was interesting is within the scope B, they were particularly key to the asset allocation. And so if you basically said, okay, you've got scope A plus the asset allocation, the other consultant has semi-annual performance reporting and maybe benchmarks is a good example, because we've had lots of discussions about how should the benchmark be. That way, that person's a bit more objective, not totally responsible for hands on hands. It's a different mix, but maybe about closer to what he wanted, that full circle.
Rich?
So always a little dangerous. I need to do a little thinking out loud and see if I can get everybody to help with this. I kind of like the approach. I mean, just sort of generically having more than one voice is a good thing. I have several concerns, I guess. One is, the one advantage of having a single general consultant is they are clearly at any given moment responsible for everything, right? And they know that they should weigh in.
Well, actually, you're responsible.
Well, I understand that, but that we expect their advice, and that they are, right, that we expect their advice, and that there is no subject that doesn't belong to them
Yeah.
at any given moment. If we have this other, if we have, I hate to, I'm not sure if we want to wander down to the jambalaya approach, but if one of them has got the seafood and the other has got the rice in the jambalaya, are there risks involved that neither will think it belongs to them and jump in? Right, and so that's one kind of concern I have generically. There's a piece of me that wouldn't mind seeing them both be general consultants and occasionally duke it out, but we also, have a professional staff, and now we're starting to get a lot of voices in the room, and on some of the issues that we've had, like asset allocation, I'm not sure that a multiple set of voices adds a lot of clarity to the conversation, which I found at any given moment inherently kind of ambiguous or unclear or uncertain. So adding more people to say, well, gee, we just don't know what the future's going to be like, is a little bit of I'm not sure that's an advantage to us or a disadvantage to have that. So, although, like I say, off ways with generally like more voices than not. Well, I guess I'll sort of stop there. It's not clear to me how, the other piece, I guess, is what I was thinking about is if we have two full consultants, we have now dramatically increased the cost.
If there was total redundancy.
If there were total redundancy. And the other piece is if we're going to use the jambalaya approach, do I think that they're out of this other group? Do I need to know what those pieces are? Because some of them, it occurred to me that one or two of these firms was somewhat better on some of these aspects than others. So if I'm going to parse it out, right, would that make a difference in who I chose as the second consultant, depending on what the parsing was looking like in terms of what we were going to peel out of the equation? Because some clearly showed a greater interest in some things than in others. So, or maybe greater capacity in some things than others. I don't quite know the answer to that piece of the equation either. Does it make it easier or harder for us to pick number two? If we don't know, in fact, who's going to get what out of the stew. So those are kind of my questions as opposed to answers. I don't know that it adds any enlightenment to the thing, but to the subject, but it's just sort of what's on my mind I do like it's not that I disagree with the approach, I just don't know what all the ramifications are going to be of a shift like that. So I raise some questions.
So there's Tom and then Paul, and then there's a couple of us that have not weighed in yet on the motion for two consultants, and I'd like to see if we can hear from those voices as well, because that will help us make the decision, if that's okay. So we're going to Tom and then Paul, and then those of us who have not weighed in on whether or not we want two consultants. I'd appreciate everyone weighing in. So Tom, and then Paul, and then Arena.
Okay, so my reaction is a couple points. One, I am most interested in having a couple voices on asset allocation. That's where the value creation is going to be. That's where we do the best, create the most value for the fund. And I think that's where we can get the most benefit. My sense is if it's another $100,000 or $200,000 on a $160 billion fund, and we improve performance by 0.2 of a point, we've more than paid for that. So that's the first point. My second thought is that I think there's a kind of slightly different, and we all have our favorites, I'm sure, among the other three, but I think all three of them are slightly more market-oriented and markets-oriented in their analysis of risk and return than I think PCA is, which is more macro-oriented. And I think we want that second voice. So I'd be in favor, and what I had in mind when I made the motion is that the Part A thing would be split up, and we would, as a board, say to the two firms we picked, say, okay, we want you both to advise us on asset allocation, and we're hoping that you're going to come to a consensus. To the extent you have different points of view, we'd like to hear about that. And we want to make the fees work on that basis, plus or minus 10% of the highest of those two bids.
Asset allocation is B, right?
Huh?
Isn't asset allocation
B.
category B?
Yeah.
And I'm looking at Chris. Is there anything with that that's uncomfortable?
Doesn't give me any concern. No.
Okay, good. All right. Paul?
I agree with Tom about that. The only thing I would add is I would just expand it a little bit, asset allocation and risk, which are combined.
Yeah.
But I think I don't think that manager evaluation or performance reporting, that we need duplication there, but I think it's asset allocation and risk assessment is where it would be good to have a second viewpoint.
So it'd be asset allocation and risk. Okay.
Can I just ask, are you guys, I'm just trying to get my head around category A and B. So you guys are both addressing issues in category B, right? Asset allocation and risk, is that right?
Yeah.
And so you're saying the policy and portfolio investment consultant and the performance part of category B, that could be, like PCA could do that or some other
Yeah,
group could do it?
I don't think we need duplication of
That's
that.
up.
Right.
So one
We can
person,
assign to
one,
one
okay,
firm or
got
the
it.
other.
Okay,
That would be my.
got it.
Arena?
Yeah, I support the two firms. I agree with the hearing two voices. I think my biggest concern would be on the fee side. So I think what Tom described of giving a little room to consider that we have two, but I definitely would not support having two full freights in any way.
Frank?
I have a similar point of view. I think splitting the effort is okay. I kind of like what Chris said and what PCA was alluding to. One group would do scope A and asset allocation. The other group would do all the other stuff. I think it's cleaner delineation of effort-wise as well as cost-wise just to do it that way, or a similar way to Tom.
Okay. So clearly there's consensus around moving towards two consultants. I too support that. The next decision then is to really decide, and it sounds as if there's consensus around PCA being one of the consultants. And then we need to vote on that motion. So Lamont, can you try to read back what the motion is?
Sure, I'll
Give it a shot.
Give it your best.
We'll help.
So what I heard was a motion to hire two firms to provide services as a general consultant, and that those firms would be, essentially there'd be one firm would just do asset allocation, would focus on asset allocation and risk. Is that?
They both would.
But the other firm would be, would be the overall general consultant for scope A and B.
Go ahead, Tom, just jump in.
Yeah, to clarify, what I had in mind most recently, maybe as an amendment to the motion, is that the two firms would split up Part A, monitoring and benchmarking. And the two firms would be joint on asset allocation. Well, that's part of A, so basically splitting those.
It's actually part of B.
No, that's not actually part of it, just for clarification.
Chris, do you?
See, I'm not so sure I
I
agree with
know,
that.
that gets a little wonky.
What I had, and I might have been obviously wrong, I had that you were talking about both firms would do scope A services, and you would split the scope B where both firms would do asset allocation, but only one firm would do performance and benchmark stuff.
Duplication in A, we
Okay, you want to
Give
divide
some-
up A?
some- Yeah, some of A to one firm and other.
Okay,
I would
what
move-
fair how to do that?
I guess one way to think of it is moving performance evaluation into A, and they split that pie. You know, sort of 50-50 way.
Yeah, I think what Alan brought up about scope A, you could divide it between somebody who just comes up to a plan on the policies, and then somebody else who's involved in implementation, picking managers, portfolio. Alan's point would have been that those are both parts of implementation, and it's hard to cleanly divide those. You don't want somebody saying, you know, the policies go this way, and then somebody executes it that way. That's one thought. But we could try and sit down with them and say, okay, let's divide this up. You could even divide them, may get confusing, but you could divide them by asset classes. You have scope A responsibilities for this one, this one, this one. You have it for that one, that one. But we can, you know, that's. But your goal was to split the scope so that it wasn't double fees.
Right.
Am I right? Okay.
And that both were advising on asset allocation. The other
And risk.
categories can be divided.
Okay.
Would it make sense to then determine the second firm and find out what the strengths of that second firm are to figure out how to divide the rest of that out? I mean, it's kind of hard to do that abstractly.
Yeah, do one, yeah.
Before we do that, I think it's Dana and then Sharon has one to jump in. Go ahead, Dana.
So I guess when we started to have the conversation about, when we got further in the conversation and talked about making sure that both firms did the asset allocation and the risk, I saw it, I envisioned it as we would have PCA BR, main general consultant, do A, B, but that we would have the second firm join in and give us their opinions on the asset allocation and the risk.
That's what
I agree with Alan. I don't think that you can separate a lot of this out because it all plays into each other. The policies, the implementation, trying to split that out, I think would be very, very difficult. Not so much difficult, but not practical. And then trying to get into the fee structure around that. I think I agree with everyone that it's important for the asset allocation and the conversation that we have about risk. Those are our two largest concerns, I think, moving forward in the environment we find ourselves in. So I can see the value of having two, but I really don't see the value of having two just to split things equally, or, you know, one does reporting and the other one does implementation, or one does policy. That just doesn't make sense to me.
Can I say it back to you, Dan? Just want to make sure we understand the fee part of that. So in your suggestion, PCA would be awarded the fees as bid for the whole piece, and then we would negotiate a smaller set of fees related to asset allocation and risk for whoever you choose to be the second firm.
And that's kind of how I understood it when Tom had said, you know, for an extra couple $100,000 or whatever for what we gain, and so that's kind of where I went, and that I think suits us better.
We're trying to make sure we can always make this work from a procurement standpoint, since you're kind of changing the terms of the request, so we have to.
So could I clarify, so the first firm would do everything, and then the second firm would be an addition on those particular pieces? Otherwise, you wouldn't get the two, two sets of eyes
On those two pieces.
on those
Right.
two pieces.
That's how I saw it. I don't know if
I just want-
anybody else is
I
going to
just
go
wanna
in
make
that
sure I
direction, but that's
understood.
kind
We're
of
gonna
how I
keep
saw it.
giving you feedback to make sure we can implement whatever we think we are in.
Tom and then Terry.
Okay, I think Terry and I are about to, hopefully, I don't know, possibly make the same point, but I think to the extent you say, Alan, you're A and B and somebody else is B, then I think somebody else B is gonna have a fairly minor role, and we're not gonna get the full benefit. And I don't know, this just mirrors my experience as being a professional in joint situations. If you're truly joint and you divide the work up all the way through, you get a truly cooperative effort. If one person is doing 80% of it and the other person is there jointly on 20, it just, the other person doesn't get their origin. Is my reaction.
Terry, did you?
Yeah, I think, Tom, we were probably going down the same path. I heard basically Mr. Rue comment that if you're doing having the asset allocation risk not being part of being separate was a concern for them. And I agree with Tom's point that if you only have two firms involved only in the asset allocation risk, that's not much like hiring two firms. I think I've heard most people comment that we do want to hire two firms, and we don't want a division to the extent that our CIO feels that it can be accomplished and based upon discussions with the two firms that we ended up ultimately selecting, or this PCA and a second firm.
Were you, in
So-
your model, Terry, were you pitching two?
Excuse me?
Were you pitching two full fee schedules, or that there'd be a reduced fee schedule because they're not all?
No, I think the only area where both are equally involved is an asset allocation risk.
I see.
The rest, all the other services are divided up in an appropriate manner, is what I heard you say.
Irena?
Yeah, I agree with what Terry's just laid out.
Okay.
I
Sharon?
think that's my question though, is what does that look like? Because conceptually, I was sort of tracking with what Dana was saying, but as you're talking, Tom, I agree with the concept, but I guess I'm worried about, I'm just going back and forth. I think having two consultants is a good idea to get this other voice. I just wonder, since we haven't, at least in the time I've been here, we haven't done this before. We've had one general consultant, so now we're doing two. What does it look like to divide the tasks, I guess, in a way that's, that's going to be most helpful? I mean, at the end of the day, we want it to add value to our decision-making for the fund. So how do we, I guess I just don't understand conceptually. I get the whole, both of them chiming in on asset allocation and risk. I guess the other parts, how do you divide that in a way that for them, as staff or, as consultants, makes sense and isn't so siloed?
Well, the
Tom?
question to me, my reaction is.
I got to get you on the mic,
Well,
Tom.
yeah.
So click on his name. You should be able to click all the way at the top because you replace her. No, go ahead and take me out. Click on his name again.
Yep,
And then click where my name is, all the way up.
got it. Thank you, Dana. Tom?
Yeah, my reaction is, we got to remember, these guys are consultants. They're not actually on the line doing the work. We've got a terrific staff. We have other outside consultants advising the staff on manager selection and all of that.
Right.
So to parse up what they review and consult and advise us about is, a very doable thing.
Okay.
If they were the primary staff, I'd
That'd be
agree with
different.
all these comments
Right,
about
right,
division
right.
of roles,
Okay.
but they're our consultants. They're not our
Our staff.
primary line operators.
I would still have more comfort though, even as you say that, what are they gonna consult us on, I guess? Or is that important? Is that what you're saying, Tom? It's not that important that we parse it out? Okay,
We'll know who's primary on.
okay.
Frank?
Quick question for Chris. It was agreed upon that other funds do split these efforts. What is the division effort like in other funds? And what are the choices that we have? What do other funds do?
There's not a good industry standard I wish I could present to you. Oregon has divided it similar to the way we did, that there's more a clean division of duties so that they know. Both of you are at PERS. My perception is PERS is you have one main consultant doing everything, and then PCA kind of is kibitzing, coming out of the crowd. I don't know, do they issue an opinion on everything Wilshire does, or do they just comment when called on? When they're asked.
Right.
So, I don't know what that, my perception with that is I have seen that used, that individual board members then play off the conflict there. I was in favor of a cleaner division of duties so that we knew what we were paying for.
I got that though.
Arena?
Yeah, I just wanted to go back to what Chris said earlier on, is that we would take the action to approve the 2 consultants and then allow Chris and his staff to, and the procurement staff to engage in a discussion about how to divide it up. And I think we have to give them some discretion to do that, because the consultants that we choose may say, well, I don't want to divide it that way. So I don't really think that's something we can decide here. We need to let them do that with the parameters that we set forth, 2 consultants and with some sort of fee notion. Tom, you had mentioned the 10%. I mean, I think there's some flexibility there, but we have to let them figure it out.
Go ahead, Chris.
But I'm not opposed to that at all. I would just ask, I'm again reticent to step in your place. I would want at least one board member to be involved in that discussion. Obviously, potentially your investment committee chair or whoever you pick, so that you can say, yeah, I'm okay with that. That's what we want.
Paul?
Several people have said the same thing that I was going to say. I think we can work it out. But there needs to be substantive roles for both to play. To work it out.
Dana?
Okay, you guys have convinced me. But I think there are consultants, and we should be telling them what we want them to do. Or at least give staff a direction to start with, instead of letting the 2 firms that we decided to choose decide what they want to do for us. I mean, they could always come back and say, we'd rather do it like this, but at least we're giving them some sort of, we're giving them some sort of idea. So, and you know,
They responded to.
well, no, I agree with that, but Michael, this is where I was gonna go. So, because we have A and B delineated, we could at least start with, moving the asset allocation into A.
No.
Okay, well,
It's both, right?
no, I'm sorry. Adding the asset allocation to A, not taking it out of B, but adding it to A, so that the policy and implementation.
They still want dual.
I want A split and B to be joined. All the dollars are in A.
But no, but so for me, I guess I'm looking at it as the performance report then gives us an evaluation of how well the advice on implementation goes. But maybe I'm totally wrong. And so that we're actually picking up value from splitting those 2 functions, but they're still both picking up the asset allocation and the risk. And Michael's already taken off, and I gotta go too, so.
So we have Rich and then Irena, and let's see if we can get a vote.
Okay, I just want to make sure I understand this correctly. In order to do what's been suggested, we are reducing the scope of Alan's contract. Okay, so we're all clear on that.
Correct.
That he will be doing less than he is now in some way. And we will be adding someone in to second guess on asset allocation. And is there an and other than asset allocation?
And that second firm would be doing some portion of A and some portion of the performance measurement, or the performance measurement.
So they would be,
one firm.
whatever we peel off from Alan will go to somebody else.
Correct.
And, okay, I guess I understand that. I'm not, aside from the fact that we will keep the fees down, I'm not sure I see what the benefit is of that. And I do want to point out that if we expect more, if we want to buy more, which is, I think is what we're saying, we want more advice. If we want to buy more, we have to be prepared to pay more. I don't think you're really going to get more without paying for it. So I think we should be clear about that. Something is going to get lost somewhere if we think we do it. And I do think that Alan's argument that there's something to somebody having a more holistic approach, we should not just sort of cavalierly toss that over the side in the interest of saving some money. And clearly being cognizant of the fact we don't want to, at the very least, appear to be spending a whole lot more on consultants. So I get that's my reservation about that. I got the idea of what we're trying to do. I'm not clear on what we're going to be losing. And I don't think we've had a good enough conversation about what we lose by making the shift. Because I think we lose something. I do think we gain something, but I do think we lose something, and are we prepared for that?
Sharon?
I'd like to just make a friendly amendment to Tom's motion. And just to say, I actually feel like I have a lot of confidence that Harry, Chris, you know us, you've heard us. I guess my proposal, my amendment, friendly amendment would be to ask for Harry and Chris, and if Tom wants to weigh in, in terms of figuring out this allocation of who's going to do what. I trust the competence and the, so I guess I would just ask that as a friendly amendment to your amendment, is to delegate our chair of investments along with our staff. I don't want to put Chris in a corner of having the staff. I know you want to keep your hands out of it, but I certainly think it's important to hear your voice to move forward and figure out this allocation of how we're going to do it.
I accept that as friendly, assuming you mean that it's meaningful roles for both firms.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Paul?
Then I'm fine with that, as long as it's meaningful roles for both.
Meaningful roles.
Yes.
So not a 20/80, but
That's
more
right.
of a.
Okay, so I think we're ready to take a vote. And I also have a little note here that some folks have planes to catch. So I would
ask one
hate
more quick
to be here all day and not get to some conclusion with this. So we have about 15 minutes before 3 board members need to leave.
Okay, can I ask one quick question?
Sure, Rich.
Would this process require this to come back again? Because it's not clear the scope of the contracts we're doing, and do we need to approve those scopes, or can we actually delegate that out and leave it?
My suggestion is to leave the scopes the way they are, because you can have a broader scope of work than the assignment, and the assignments can be, they can be worked out. Staff can say, this is what we're going to use, this is what we're not going to use. And we can work with procurements. I don't think it has to come back to you.
From an authority standpoint, it doesn't. I think is in Robin's, go ahead, Rob.
Well, I just want to make sure that as we conclude this, we have the scoring information that we need to close out the procurement process, which would be to award some kind of score to both of the entities that you pick that allows us to divide the work in a way that is appropriate based on your direction. I think in terms of that, we'll have to parse the bids out in a way that's also reflective of what was bid in terms of the nature of the work, have people commit to those numbers, and then we'll recompile them so that we can demonstrate a tie-in to the bid process. I mean, those kinds of things are going to have to be done.
Okay, so I guess the rest of that comment is I'm generically okay with the notion, but I do think the devil's in the details.
Why
And
don't
I
we
would-
tidy it up for February?
Right.
I would very much like to see what we mean by this split, and who gets what, and how that's gonna work, and how we think that's all gonna fit together before
We
I'm
haven't
totally
decided
okay
the
with
second
it.
person either.
Chris, did you want to?
Yeah, the other contract,
Could-
the
Yeah.
PCA contract goes through June, so if
Yeah.
you're comfortable, we will tidy up those and make sure that the procurement process supports your desires. You are gonna pick the other firm though, right?
We do
Yes.
need to
Yeah.
pick the other
Okay.
firm. That's the one thing we haven't done.
Okay.
All I was going to add, Harry, was all the stuff Robin talked about, that's what we take care of. You guys pick the winners, and then we figure out the points and the score and submit it. The review team we're at your service.
All right.
So we'll make it work. But
So-
we can bring it back in February so you can approve a clean slate and like what you like.
Lamont, you ready to read
Are you
back the
with
motion?
us?
So we could take a vote?
Okay, let's see. So I have the motion as, the decision is to hire 2 firms. The scopes of work will be divided as determined by the chair and the CIO, except that both firms will jointly provide asset allocation and risk services.
And both of us have substantial responsibilities.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Lamont. So that does not need to be a roll call vote, does it?
No.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay. We need to decide,
I want to abstain. I'm sorry.
one abstention.
Abstaining.
There was discussion about PCA being one of the firms, but it wasn't formally
So moved.
moved. It's been moved that PCA
Second.
be one of the firms, seconded by Ms. Hedrick. Any discussion? All those in favor of PCA being one of the firms, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. And now we need to choose the second firm.
I move RVK. Be the second firm. I couldn't hear you. RVK?
Second.
Oh.
Coons.
Okay, Ms.
We have discussion?
Mr. Lawson has moved, Michael's moved that it be RVK, seconded by, is there a second?
I heard, did Dana?
I did, I
Okay.
seconded it.
It was seconded by,
Yeah, can we have a
Yeah, we
discussion?
will. We
I
will.
I
We will.
really don't want to be railroaded by, you know.
yeah,
That's what it's for.
Yeah.
well,
That's why I
this
made
is
the
for,
motion.
this is for discussion purposes, for discussion purposes. So it was second, RVK, Michael, seconded by Dana for discussion purposes. Michael, you want to speak to
Oh.
your motion?
I mean, I was just very impressed with the professional nature of their presentation. I mean, all of the firms are very good. And, you know, I think that we would, well,
Oh, yeah. Oh. Let me get you up there, Michael. You want to push in again? So I click, Dana, I click on him here.
Oh.
Yeah, click on Michael, and then click up the vacant. There you go.
Go ahead, Michael.
yeah, I simply believe that all of the firms are very good. Of the remaining 3 firms, I was most impressed with Kuhn, and not just because I was most fresh at the time that they came in. But you know, I quite frankly would find it difficult to articulate a specific difference between them and my number 3, which I won't mention right now. But the fact is that of the remaining 3, I felt that they were the strongest after PCA.
Okay. Sharon?
So I actually didn't have a strong response to RVK. I thought they were, I do think the other candidates were all strong. I really liked Makita. I just know in hearing, is it John? Is it, what's the?
John Ortega?
No, the guy that does infrastructure for us, the guy from Makita. Anyway,
David
sorry.
Allshutter.
Anyway, what's his name?
David Allshutter.
Thank you. I just really liked Makita's presentation. I think, I mean, they all look like they were under 20, so I can't believe they have 19 years of experience. But just their perspective in terms of, I think, as PCA has so much history with us, I kind of liked some of the sort of their approach, and I thought they had great responses to things we're passionate about ESG and diversity. I didn't like RVK. I didn't like how, can I say all this stuff in public session? Okay. I didn't really like how, I felt like the 2 people for RVK, the gentleman that was the CEO, or he kind of dominated. There wasn't, they kept talking about team, but I didn't think they presented as a team. And I kind of always listened to actions over words. So that kind of bothered me. So I guess to me, and I was concerned also about the limited resources, even though I know Makita is also a big firm. Just some things, kind of flags came up to me in that first presentation about resources and what a priority CalSTRS was going to be. Whereas I felt like with Makita, since they've worked with us in infrastructure, they kind of know us a little bit already. And I'm more excited about having Makita work with us than RVK. So.
Paul?
Yeah, I agree, and I had the same reaction to Coons. I just didn't think it was a team, and I didn't think that I would be as comfortable getting advice from them as I would from the Makita people, who I thought, you know, aside from the fact that I actually preferred them technically, I think they're thinking about some issues in ways that are a little bit stretch us beyond where Alan takes us. But I also just thought that all four of them spoke, the two principal people, you know, shared. There wasn't a feeling that each one of them had to fully answer every question. And I just thought they were more in sync with working with the board and talking to board members. So they were my preference.
Tom?
It's the wave is sweeping left here. I was impressed with Coons. I thought they were good, and I thought they made a good presentation. I don't think they would bring to the table what Makita brings. I think they were analytically and more market-oriented in terms of their analysis, and more and bring a clearer second point of view to PCA, and therefore a better match. I like their youth and their enthusiasm, and they did really communicate that they work as a team. So I wouldn't be uncomfortable with Coons, but I'd feel much better about Makita.
Being sensitive to time. Terry?
I agree with Tom's comments. The only thing I would add is that the cost proposal, Makita's was maybe 10% less, so maybe that's going to help a little bit relative to the issue that we have relative to having two firms involved. But again, I liked RBK. They were good. All four of them were good. But I do think I would I feel Makita brings something slightly different to the table.
Irena?
I agree with Makita. I think they're the best complement to PCA.
Okay. Rich?
I hate to go back to where I was, but I think the answer is it depends on how we split up the work. I think, you know, I think if, for example, I mean, to a certain extent, I mean, if you're, for example, if the major piece that is the analysis of the portfolios and the benchmarking and so on, I think that probably Coons has some more strength on that than Makita does. On the other hand, there's a piece of me that thinks that Makita is actually kind of interesting and young and inventive and has some interesting things to say. So depending on how you split up the work, I might feel better about one than the other. And it's really hard to know right now. If you just sort of, if we throw all the balls in the air, I'd probably come down on the side of Makita, but we aren't. I don't know which ones are up in the air. And so it's very hard for me to say this one, not that one, not knowing what it is we want to assign to them.
Sharon?
I think, Rich, just my comment to that is, you know, they've all been general consultants, so I trust that they're all professionals and that they can, I guess I have a lot of confidence that they would excel in any of the areas that we're going to assign to them.
I don't doubt that they both can do it.
So I think.
I don't doubt that.
Okay. Anyway.
Tom?
I was going to say, I think the thing we're most interested in, and we're going to get the biggest bang for our buck in, is having that very strong second voice on asset allocation, and that's what we're going to get with Makita. And I think the other work we're parsing out is the more basic work that they'll all do within a very narrow range of difference.
Let me take, just because of time, Rich, I don't mean to stifle. I want to get people who are in line. Otherwise, people are going to miss flights and people are going to be gone. Frank?
Get back in line.
I was more impressed with Makita's presentation, with the background materials they provided to us, with the backgrounds of the people who are going to be on the team. And I just make a motion to accept them as our second.
Okay, so that's a substitute motion. It has to be seconded.
That's second.
Okay, the substitute motion by Frank was to select Makita as the second consultant. It was seconded by Sharon. Procedurally, we take a vote on that, right? Okay, is that a roll call vote? No. Okay, so all those in favor of the substitute discussion, I'm sorry. It's late, Rich.
I know.
It's late.
I'm sorry. I just,
Let me put you in here, Rich.
okay.
Discussion on the substitute motion.
I would like, I mean, I think we've dismissed some of these. Like, for example, I find benchmarking extraordinarily difficult to do, and I've not always been happy with the way we benchmark. If you don't benchmark right, you can't see what you've got, right? And it's very difficult to make a decent assessment of what you've done and who's doing well and who's not doing well. So I think we've sort of quickly dismissed that as anybody can do it, sort of things, and I'm not sure I agree with that. And well, we haven't weighed that out, right? We've said, okay, this matters more to us than that. And this is all part of my hesitation around this sort of divvying things up. We need to be clear about what we're going to be doing. And I don't disagree with the motion. I like these guys, right? I'm okay with that. But I would be more comfortable if I knew what we were doing with that. And if the only piece we're concerned about is the asset allocation and the others are of less concern to us, they're not of less concern to me. This benchmarking thing has been an issue for us, and it's been an issue, and it shows up as an issue in a lot of areas that matter to us, not just the performance of our managers, but in a lot of areas that are difficult, concern to us, including our own compensation. You know, these benchmark things matter, how we do this, and I think we're pushing that aside a little too lightly. And not that I don't think these guys can do it, but I don't know who's getting it, right? I don't know who gets that work.
Well, isn't that?
Okay, so the motion on the floor is, the
Well,
motion,
we've picked the two people.
motion on the floor is to select Makita as the second consultant. Michael? You're in,
Well,
you're in line.
Speak to the motion.
I was going to withdraw my motion.
Okay?
But, you know, procedurally, if we vote on the substitute motion, we vote to substitute his motion for my motion, and then we vote on the motion? Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so I don't need to technically withdraw. Okay, so that was my question was totally procedural.
Very good.
I'm glad you
That's
keep
pretty
track
sharp
of
at
us, man, 'cause
5:15.
I'm like, whoa.
Okay, so seeing no one else in the queue, all those in favor of selecting Makita as
Or
the,
just substituting the motion.
it's a substitute motion.
All in favor of substituting?
All in favor of the substitute motion,
Which is to select Makita.
which is to select Makita, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, now we have to vote on whether or not Makita will be selected. Thank you, Michael.
Keeping us that lawyer, I love that.
So all those in favor of selecting Makita as the second consultant, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Dane? Bye, Dana.
Bye, Dana.
All right, so that is, that's done. And there was direction for Chris and I to communicate and speak, coordinate a meeting with PCA and Makita.
And it'll come back in February.
And it'll come back in
That's
February.
right. So Rich's concerns about division, that'll
Yeah.
be addressed in February.
And if you want help, I'm happy to join.
I'll take you up on it. We have closed session. Will, why don't we just,
What time is our flight, you guys? What
do
time?
we need to do it, or can we postpone it till February?
You need to hear
Okay.
about it.
Okay. Go ahead, Chris.